I've heard this question about Trump's midheaven a number of times, and although I remember addressing it in a previous video, I noticed it came up again, so here's my answer on this topic. Some think, and apparently it includes certain astrologers, that the trines to Trump's midheaven made by the transiting triple Capricorn conjunction will serve to keep him in office. Examine the 2020 trajectories of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, and you notice that Jupiter is trine his midheaven during late March and early June to mid-July. Though if you take into account the station it made in late May at 27 plus degrees, you could easily see mid-March to mid-July as a Jupiter trine all the way through. Saturn, meanwhile, made a trine to the midheaven in late January, early February, and Pluto is solidly trine the midheaven from January to mid-August. Now here's the thing. I think you would need to be unrealistically optimistic, if not perhaps delusional, to say that these periods were positive for Trump. By all accounts, his profile has dropped precipitously as the populace witnessed his utterly incompetent management of the pandemic and the concurrent cratering of the economy. In particular, you might say something specific like a Jupiter trine would have signified some kind of good fortune, yet the spring and early summer featured horrendous mistakes related to his completely inappropriate decisions and choices, and his poll numbers weren't going up, they actually cratered. It is true that very early on in the pandemic, he had a fairly high approval rating, for him that is, because high in Trump's case is never more than 45%, but this didn't last long, and by the time he was suggesting we should inject ourselves with disinfectants, any possible positive approval had completely disappeared. You could also think that Saturn trining would mean expressing some kind of strategy or discipline around the topic, but his actions in January and February were anything but. Of course, he says his choices back then were masterful and that he saved us all from even more fatalities, or fatalities as he calls them. But he's on record saying that COVID was nothing, it was just one case and it would disappear right away, etc. So yes, he says and he says and he says. That's Trump for you. Indeed, I believe the history of this man will be summarized as those two words. He says, he says. But, like a judge once famously said to a recalcitrant defendant, just because you say something, it doesn't mean it's true. Anyway, that Saturn trine didn't do one bit of good. And Pluto trining the midheaven from mid-January to mid-August, how good was that? The only thing I can think of is that it promoted his fascistic, authoritarian way of doing things, get rid of all experts who disagree, just follow my logic on the problem and everything will be fine, which of course was completely wrong. And we have to add the Bible walk of shame in mid-June, right in the middle of a tight Pluto trine, when he and his totally ignorant son-in-law thought it was a brilliant move, only to find themselves the object of complete and utter ridicule and rejection, for obviously good reason. So now I would be expected to believe that as we head to the election, and with further trines of Saturn before and during the election, as well as Jupiter just after, that this will turn his fortunes around and help to keep him in power. Forgive me for being really skeptical on this. You see, the problem is, while these trines are happening, his 12th sign Saturn-Venus are also being directly opposed from the same degrees, and both those planets, especially Venus, relate to his career, his success. You can disagree, but it's hard to disagree with what already has happened. The midheaven has been getting these trines all year long, even while it seems to me 2020 has been utterly horrendous for Trump. He is now reduced to attacking the post office so that voting will be more difficult. But since the post office in his chart has a lot to do with the Venus, good luck with that one. As with everything else he tries in 2020, it will go to nowhere land. So, bottom line, the midheaven isn't going to help him, as I've said in a prior video. This man is toast.